everyone, welcome back for episode 3 of the Neuroart meditation. So this is what I ended up with last week after doing all of my neuro lines and all of my roundings. And what I want to start with today, so I went back after I did all my neuro lines and I did kind of thicken a lot of my shapes. And actually, after looking at this backwards, I kind of realized that I'd never really thickened this one. So before we start with the color, I want to go through a couple of things with you that I didn't do off camera when I was doing all of my lines. So like I said, when I'm looking at this backwards, I'm kind of realizing that this is blending in a little bit too much like the neuro lines. So what I want to do is that I want to thicken this line before we start with the color. And then once you are done with all of your, I'm going to take these out because these keep slipping. These are some other little papers from past projects. One of the things that you can do before you start with your color is after you've done your neuro lines, one of the things that you can do is look at your picture. And I'm also going to thicken this line. This line doesn't quite stand out. This rectangle doesn't stand out as much as I'd like to either. So you can kind of look at some of your general shapes too and see if there's something about your picture that just doesn't stand out as much as you would like, doesn't feel comfortable to you. So one of the things that I'm going to do is that balance-wise, this area feels like it could use another circle. So I'm going to add another circle down here. So you can kind of add a circle to any area where your picture doesn't feel comfortable or balanced or feels like it's lacking something. But once you do that, make sure that you do go back and add in any other roundings that you will need. So anytime that you add something, you will definitely need to go back and add your roundings. So that is one thing that I'm going to do. So I need to thicken this line right here. Thicken these lines for my triangle. And I hope you are enjoying doing your project. And remember, there is nothing wrong with what you do. Everything that you do is right. And remember that your first project, nobody's project is going to look like mine whatsoever. That's the beauty of this, is that nobody's two projects will ever look alike. And if you look up any other neurographic art online, none of the projects ever look the same. So yours will never look the same as anyone else's. They're never supposed to. And you'll get happier with each one as you continue to work on them. Okay, so I'm going to draw another circle here. I forgot to turn my music on. Okay, and then I'm going to do my roundings. Just don't forget to do your roundings. I need to do my roundings with. Remember to do your roundings between shapes as well. So like I'm doing them right here where the corners, where the little edges meet of the shapes as well. It's not just where the neurolines meet either. It's where the shapes meet as well. Okay, I got them all. So this is now a changed shape, and that feels much better to me. Okay, so now we are going to go to color. So with color, the main rules are that you need to have at least 3 to 4 color groupings. And then once you have that, you are free to do whatever you want. So the colors that you add, you can either just go with them intuitively and whatever works for you, or you can look up the colors and what they mean ahead of time. And whatever your shapes actually mean, you can assign colors to those. And like if it represents a person and that person, you can use their favorite color, or if that color has a specific property to it, then you can, you know, if you look up the colors, each color has specific properties to it. You know, like red, passion, those kind of things. So if you want to look those up, and you know, like if there's a specific intention that you're working on, and if you want to neutralize it or something, then maybe pick a color that represents neutralization. I'm not going to go through what all of the colors mean just for time purposes, but if you want to look that up on your own, then please go ahead and do so. I would you know, recommend that if that's something that you want to add extra intention to your picture, because I'm going through the programs and such, I do know what all of the color intentions have, so that sometimes adds a little bit more purpose and power, I feel, to my intentions. And especially if some of the shapes represent a person, you know, sometimes that also helps those particular areas to stand out on a paper. So sometimes I'll use their favorite color, or a color that represents them to me in particular. I will use that. So that being said, there's 2 different ways that you can go about also with adding the color. So you can add the color to the whole shape, and then you can also add the color to the flow. So like if you follow the neuroline, you can kind of add the flow like that goes all within. So like if you can see right here, this flow kind of goes all within this shape right here. So you can follow the whole flow, like a river kind of. You can follow a flow, and like if you see a flow goes all the way through, you can follow the whole flow and have it go through the shapes. And you want to have a flow go through and carry all the way through from one end of the paper to the other end of the paper, or what have you. And so you need to have 3 to 4 color groups, whether they're within an entire shape or whether they're within a flow. And then once you do that, you can do whatever you want with a color. So pick, you know, when you look at your paper, kind of analyze it and see if you see any flows that kind of go all the way throughout. The flows can kind of be touching, you know, obviously they'll be kind of separated by some of these neural lines, and but you'll kind of start to see them stand out, especially after you start to maybe color shapes. When I use my colors, I use a combination of markers and colored pencils, and I do shading. If that's a little bit too advanced for you, then just go with one, and that's perfectly fine. When I do my shading, I'll do darker lines, and I'll do the darker marker shading around the edges of the shapes or the edges of the flow, and then the lighter colored pencil on the inside. So that's kind of how I go with my color. So I will start a little bit of this, and you can kind of see how it goes, and then I will probably turn the camera off and end the session and do some of the rest of it off camera. So I'm going to start with a shape that kind of represents a person, and I'm going to have it as a certain color, and you will kind of see how I do that. So I'm going to go with purple on that. So I'm going to go around the edges here with the marker for the darker coloring. And sometimes your lines, your neuro lines may kind of blend in a little bit, especially with some of the darker colors. And that's perfectly fine. You'll kind of eventually stand out a little bit more after your whole thing is complete. And sometimes I'll start with an entire shape and start with an entire color, and then kind of go back and kind of come back over if I see a flow that runs through it. And depending on what the coloring is, obviously, because this is a bit of a darker color, it's a little bit harder to have that color run through there. But if it was a lighter color, you can always kind of change the flow to run through it. So if you had like yellow, you can make a green or a blue flow run through that after you've already kind of done the shape in that color. So as you can see, I'm kind of going a little bit heavier on one side with my shading, and I kind of tend to do that a little bit with my artistic background, and I kind of do tend to do my shading as if like the sun was shining on things like shadows. That's just a personal preference. That's entirely up to you how you prefer to do that. And again, if that's a little bit too advanced for you, then just go ahead. And that's why I'm going to do a lot of my coloring off camera, because I will tend to take quite a bit of time doing this, and I certainly don't want to hold you up on camera for any major extended length of time. another shade of purple, I think. You probably can't really even see too much. Unfortunately, I only have one color purple for my colored pencils, which I wish I actually had another color purple. You do have a pencil sharpener. Something to have very handy. Next thing that I'm going to go with here is the part of the triangle that is attached to this one little part. There's just some color missing here. I missed. Okay. So the next part I want to get is the blue that is attached right here from the triangle. I'm going to do blue for that. I'm actually going to kind of extend just a tiny little bit into that, and my markers can kind of go over that, which will kind of highlight the edges of the triangle. And you can do that too. That was what I was talking about with the overlapping of colors. You can kind of overlap your colors sometimes. Markers in the backwards here that I'm using. I'm going to use two different blues. Kind of go over this blue in here as well, kind of blend that color in a little bit. You can kind of see how that's shaping up right now. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start following, I'm going to start taking that blue again, and I'm going to actually make a flow out of this. And I'm going to start following that triangle with one of the flows and some of the neural lines that are attached to it. So I'm just going to start with a marker. Just outline the edges, and then I'll go back and color. Color that afterwards. And because this comes from the arrow that is decreasing, I'm going to do this with the flow that's going in the downward direction. So I'm going to try and use this flow that's going to be moving downwards. So that's kind of the psychological thought behind where I'm going with this. So I'm trying to use all of the connecting flows that are going in a downward direction. And remember to stop and use your journal if you have any thoughts while you're doing your artwork. Don't ever forget that. Especially something that pops into your mind as an important thought that you don't want to forget about. And we may add more of the blue flow later. But for now, this is the blue flow that I wanted to continue from this particular triangle. And I'm going to go back and do the shading. this is what we have so far for today. So the flow, right now I have it going circumventing this. I haven't decided whether I'm going to want the flow to go all the way through. I may or may not change my mind on that, but for right now I just have it dumping out over here. I may continue this flow all the way through. I haven't made up my mind yet, so I'm just leaving that part blank for right now. But that's what I have so far, and we will work on more. I might work on a little more off camera and show you at the beginning what I did. And if not, we will come back and maybe work on some more together next week. Hope you enjoyed this session. See you next week.